Welcome to Insights into Success, where with your host Paul Dodds, we hope to educate, inspire and motivate you to achieve your own personal success. We talk to guests from all around the world from a variety of walks of life to hear the realities of their own journey to success. What challenges have they faced? How have they coped with failure? And what have been the keys or will be the keys to their own success? In our Read to Succeed interviews, we talk books that have inspired our guests, and for some, they share their secrets to marketing success. Join us as we give you insights into success. Well, welcome back to Insights into Success, where today our theme is Read to Succeed, and our special guest is Jeremy Slate. Now, Jeremy was in our recent podcast, Insights into Success, and I've managed to persuade him to come back to share some of the books with us that he's really found inspirational. So I know that Jeremy's got a really interesting list of books. So Jeremy, take it away and tell us about some books that you've read that have really inspired you, and what are they actually about, and how exactly is it that they have really motivated or inspired you?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me back, Paul. Second of all, like a lot of the books I read are going to focus on history because I find that, there's so much to be learned from that. And I think it's interesting because I think there's so much value in those experiences. I think we can bring in every single part of our life, whether it's business, whether it's relationships, whatever it may be. And the first one that I was really, really interested in it's called The Great Bridge by David McCullough. And it's about building the Brooklyn Bridge in, the late 1800s, early 1900s. And it's wild to, like, number one, learn the level of technology that was required to build this. So I think the thing that's interesting is to see when a dream becomes a reality, because I think it's the people that can think really big that can do some pretty incredible things. And the gentleman that actually put together the plans for this bridge, his name's John Roebling, and he was the first person to build the bridge over Niagara Falls. So he'd already had this giant achievement. He's like, well, I need a bigger one. I'm going to build the bridge from Manhattan to Brooklyn, which at that point in time, those two things weren't connected. So it was this really difficult way to get around. Commerce was very hard. And it was just a really big deal to be able to do this. So he constructs these plans. He has the whole thing ready to go. And early in the program, he dies. Wow. And it's just this, like, he has this plan, and he dies before he can execute it. And his son, Washington Roebling, ends up taking it over. And it's wild how they do it. When they put the beams in the ground to actually, like, be able to drill down to do this, they put these giant hollow tubes in. They're called caissons. And what happens is you have like 4 or 5 guys inside these things just drilling into the ground, because they got to put the supports down for the bridge. And the further they drill, the further down the tube goes. And these 4 or 5 guys would be in there, and because of all the pressure, under more water you're getting and whatever, they'd start to get the nitrogen in their blood. They call that the bends. Yeah. And it's like a really not good health issue. And Washington Roebling ends up getting sick through this whole thing. And he's incapacitated. He's in bed, and his wife runs the project. So so he's actually the architect with his name on the bridge, Washington Roebling, but his wife actually ran most of the project. And I think, to me, that's really, really interesting, because it shows, like, also the importance in having, a good support system and people on the same page, right? Like, if his wife didn't know anything about bridge building and didn't know anything about running projects, which she did because, she was very into it, that project would have never gotten done. So to me, I think that's really interesting. At the same time, just the achievement of man, when you can put, that level of ability onto something. I can't imagine. They didn't have any of the technology we had now. They just had these giant drills. They had, steam power. They had all these different things they did. And just to see that someone can achieve that, and it was this incredible technological thing, and it connects Brooklyn and Manhattan, it was incredible. And there's just, to me, there's so many more learning points from that. But those are the several things I took away.
So with the wife, I'm just curious, like, did she have any sort of formal education in that area?
I don't remember. It's been a while since I've read that one, but I know, like, the way that this actually started is the Roeblings had a company that like twisted wires, because the way they actually build those bridges is they're suspension bridges. So they would take hundreds of wires and twist them together to make cables. And that was actually where the company came from. And I believe she worked in, like, the administrative office for the company, so she probably knew enough about how it operates, and obviously enough about, like, how to actually run this project. But it doesn't get done, without Washington Roebling's wife running the project.
Wow. I mean, that's quite a remarkable achievement and incredible to have all those issues and still manage to successfully complete the project.
And it was a long project. It was like I can't remember the exact number of years, but it was like 5 or 10 years it took to build this bridge. And it as you can see, like it outlasted many of the people that had started working on it, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah. Wow. Incredible story. All right. So, what about book number two?
Number two, it's another history book. It's called Ermengarde of Narbonne and the World of the Troubadours. And it takes place in the 1100s to the 1200s in southern France, an area called Narbonne. And this is a
Mm,
really interesting part of the world because it was really kind of ahead of its time. It was close to Spain, close to southern France, and then
yeah.
also they also spoke Latin there too. So they spoke this really interesting language. It was called Languedoc. The area was called the Doc. It was like kind of this sticking out region of France, and they spoke Languedoc, which is a mix of Spanish, French, and Latin. Very, very
Wow.
interesting.
Yeah.
And they had this
Pretty
like
unique.
really enlightened society, really interesting society. And this woman, Ermengarde, during that time period, she was like a noble. So she wasn't royalty, but she was a noble where
Yeah.
her family was controlling territory. And what would happen during that time period is like, say the woman had like land that was the possession of the family. Well, once she married a man, that would become the possession of that man, right? Like he would be the noble of
Right.
that territory. But
Yeah.
what she realized is if she never got married, she would be able to act like the ruling noble. So she would continue to date over the years. She'd continue to lead men on. She'd continue to do all these different things. And she'd go, I think I'm going to get engaged now, but I'm not. And she did this for many, many years. And she was actually able to be a very successful like ruler in this area. And it was
Yeah.
actually because of her that it kept there from being war between Narbonne and Carcassonne and all these different areas in there. And she actually kept this very peaceful area with a very good economy. And she had figured out that her whole ruse was if I just let him think I'm getting married, I can keep doing what I'm doing. So to me,
Yeah.
I just think the thing is knowing the rules of the game, right? If you know the rules of the game, you can play the game like a master. And I think
Yeah.
it just shows you what you can achieve if you know all the individual rules to the game.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So I mean, she decided to not follow the norm.
Mhm.
To her, obviously, there was an element of appeal or interest in having control over, her property that she had, and yeah, choosing to look at left field and take a different approach, and sort of, I guess, probably achieve multiple goals, but in an unorthodox way, or at least at that point in time.
And the thing that was bad about that though, because there is always there can always be a negative to that, is because she never got married. When she passed, there was no issue, so nobody took over the land, and then there was fighting over the land after she died. So while the
Right.
strategy was very successful while she lived, since there was
Yeah.
no you know issue or no one to carry on the name, there was tumultuousness after that. So there is
Right.
also the negative in it as well.
Right. I guess having a child and remaining not wed wasn't really an option probably back then either. That's probably pushing
No,
it
you
too
would have
far.
been exiled from society at that point in time. That was not acceptable.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, I'm pleased I don't live back in those times. I have been to Narbonne too, by the way, which is a beautiful part of southern France.
I've never been there, but it's on the list. Like it's
Mm,
this book gave me so much appreciation for Narbonne and Toulouse and areas like that,
yeah.
which are in that part of France. And that sent me down a whole nother rabbit hole of reading books about that area of the world, which are just very interesting as well.
Yeah, and definitely worth a visit. And I think if you can go visit somewhere in the world and know a bit more about the history, you'll get even more out of it. I mean, it's a shame, isn't it? So often we can travel to different places in the world and we don't really get as much out of as what we could because we don't know the history behind it. And if
Mhm.
we did, it would mean so much more to us being in those places.
Well, you know what's interesting too, Paul? So that area of the world, as I mentioned, they got like super enlightened.
Yeah.
Have you heard of the Albigensian Crusade? It's where the
No.
Pope. So in this area of the world, these people were what was known as Cathars. So they were
Right.
kind of Christians, kind of not, kind of worshiping Apollo. Like we don't quite know like what they were doing. So they
Yeah.
got to this very like society where men and women were equal, Jews and Christians were equal, all this, like,
Oh,
it was like a very like level society that was doing quite well. So the Pope felt threatened by it. So around 1300, what's known as the Albigensian Crusade comes in, and that's where the Pope actually goes in there and kills like thousands of people. So he felt threatened by these people that had created this really like peaceful territory.
well, that sounds really Christian-like, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's when political power and religious power are intertwined, which, no matter how
Yeah.
you look on it, that's a dangerous thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, what about book number 3?
Number
What have you got
3
for us?
is of a much different bend. There's no history involved. It's called The 10X Rule by Grant Cardone.
Yeah.
And to me, this is the book that's affected every single thing I've done in my life, because
Wow.
Grant talks about the idea of, if you want to actually succeed at something, you need to do 10x the amount of effort you need to do in order to get it. Because the
Right.
reason is, like, let's say you need 10 of something. If you just go for 10, well, you're not going to have enough to get 10. Go for, if you're going to get 100 and you actually get 10. And so to
Right.
me, I've taken that in everything I've done. Like, okay, so I need to make 100 phone calls. I need to make 1,000 phone calls. I need to, reach out to 500 people. I need to do whatever it is. And so because of that, it's caused me to have a higher estimation of effort on every goal I go for, because the problem is, most people do not shoot high enough in a goal, right? Like, if you have a
Right.
good sales closing rate in the sales world, you're like at 20%. So that means if you want to sell more, you got to really, really up your numbers. So to
Yeah.
me, it's been one of the single biggest, guiding books I've read out there, though it's a very simple concept.
Yeah. And for you, how long ago did you read that book?
2012, actually, 2012, 2013. And
Right. So that was
it was
right back in the early days. So it really it was a precursor to what you've now done. So for you, really did make quite a difference.
It was a key book. It, as I said, it changed my mindset and everything. It's why when I launched my podcast, I reached out to 100 people I admired, not just 5 or 10. It's why when I, got the show going, I reached out to thousands of people, because I knew if I went to 50, it wasn't going to do anything. So it's
Yeah.
been a guiding principle to every single thing I've done in my life. And if I had to say it's been my secret success, I would say it's that.
Wow. Interesting. And in terms of your reading, what's your reading style? Do you prefer, physical book, Kobo, audio book? What do you prefer?
That's changed over the years. So as my life's gotten busier, I've always preferred like tangible paper books. That's always been my
Yeah.
thing. I like a hardcover. I like reading that way. And if you see any of my books, they have like an obnoxious amount of highlighting in it. And I don't know what I was actually going to do with it when I was highlighting it, but I'm like, oh, that's really interesting. Let me highlight it. So I've always preferred a paper book, but in the last like probably 3 or 4 years, I've gone more to Audible.
Yeah.
And that it's just tend to work more my lifestyle now. I just don't have the time
Right.
I'd like to have to sit down and read, especially with
Yeah.
kids, man. Like they can be
Yeah.
like grabbing your book and running away and laughing, Daddy, I got your book. Ha 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 ha. So for me, I found like Audible has just worked better with my lifestyle.
Right. And in terms of topics of books, I get the feeling that it's mainly history, but
History,
how would you describe?
I also love biographies and autobiographies. Like I've read
Right.
some really interesting ones. Like I read a biography of Sam Walton that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And like, because even you look at what his original perspective is and what they've done with Walmart are just like vastly different. He would not want to do what the corporation is currently doing.
Wow.
I read a really interesting book called The Everything Store. It's about the founding of Amazon, which was really good. I read another one which was obnoxiously long, and it was called Truman, about Harry S. Truman, which was quite
Oh,
interesting.
yes.
And
Yeah.
the S did not stand for anything; it just was an S because he thought he needed a middle initial.
Well, that's like Ulysses S. Grant. The S was actually a mistake when he went to military college. I'm trying to think of the proper name for it, but the military college, they made a mistake and put the S in, and it's stayed ever since. So yeah,
It's really
that
funny.
actually stood for nothing either.
Yeah, but for me, it's a lot of history books, a lot of biographies, a lot of autobiographies. I'm just always interested in things like that. It's weird because I find that those concepts are much more applicable to business and into life and to things like that, because you can see how other people think, you can see how they react,
Yeah.
you can see what they've been through.
Yeah.
I also tend to read like a lot of the same author. David McCullough, I've read a lot of his books, so he tends to be super long-winded, which can be tough sometimes.
Yeah.
I also read a lot of classics, I read Crime and Punishment by Fyodor Dostoevsky, which is really interesting. War and Peace, Tolstoy was
Wow.
interesting. Tale of Two Cities is a great book. I love reading books like that.
Yeah.
I'm very interested in, I guess the tomes of society. Atlas Shrugged, Ayn Rand. So I'm just very interested in like large, big, long topics.
And what about, do you ever read any fiction?
Not as much as I used to. I used to be
Right.
very into fiction. Like C.S. Lewis has a really great. People think of him for like The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe and things like that, but like
Yeah.
he actually has a really great like sci-fi book series. It's a 3-book series where he talks about like finding this other planet and stuff like that, which is quite interesting. So I don't read as much of that as I used to, and maybe I should. Maybe I need to get my imagination working again. But I find
Yeah.
I've been really into like history and biographies.
And how often do you read? Do you like, do you have a program for it, or you just whenever I can fit it in?
Whenever I can fit it in, whenever I'm working on something or doing something, I'm usually always listening to a podcast or an audiobook.
Yeah.
So I'm usually listening to something every day.
Right. Cool. All right, Jeremy. Well, thank you very much for staying on and sharing with us and Read to Succeed. It's been very interesting. And what I love about this is you get some really diverse perspectives and some totally different books that you probably quite possibly would never have thought of yourself. So
Mhm.
for me, I'm enjoying just being able to get some ideas of other books to read, because I like reading. Not everyone does, but I do, and I think life's an ongoing journey of learning, and reading's a great way to do it. So
Yeah.
hopefully with this podcast we can encourage people and inspire people for new books to read.
Yeah. And I guess there's one more fictional book now because it's coming to me now that we've been talking
Yeah.
about fiction. I, Claudius by Robert Graves. Very
Okay.
interesting. It takes the first few Roman emperors and it kind of turns their life into um, like a novel type thing, and PBS actually did a movie series on it, which is very
Yeah.
interesting. But I, Claudius, Robert Graves is very interesting.
Wow. Another great historical based book.
Mm.
All right, Jeremy. Well, thank you so much for that. It's been really awesome to meet you, and I appreciate you spending your time and sharing with us. And yeah, I know I've got some good benefit from it. So thank you so much, and we look forward to your book coming out soon too. So we might be able to add that to the list shortly as well.
I hope so, man. I really appreciate you having me, and I hope people were able to get some insight into what I read and what I gather from that today.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you very much, and take care.
Absolutely.